Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina wa habibina wa imamina wa qudwatina Muhammad ibn Abdullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'du. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Respected brothers and sisters, welcome to our weekly class on the explanation of Al-Muqaddimah Al-Ajurrimiyyah. And at the moment we are covering the explanation Al-Tuhfah Al-Sanniyyah by Sheikh Muhammad Muhyiddin Abdul Hamid Rahimahullah. And a few weeks ago we started looking at the marfu'at. We started looking at al-marfu'at. Yes, those things which are marfu'. Those things which are marfu'. Nah? And we mentioned the al-marfu'at as-sab'ah. They are 7 in number. And the first of them is al-fa'il. And alhamdulillah, we have looked at the fa'il in quite some detail. Nah? And the next one, the second one from the marfu'at, is that which takes the place of a fa'il. And that is an-na'ibu anil fa'il. So today we will look at an-na'ibu anil fa'il. Inshallah, we should be able to complete that quite comfortably, bi'idhnillah. So let me share the book with you. Now, so this is where we are starting today. An-na'ibu anil fa'il. طيب. Before we do that, let's look at an example of something. For example, I say ضرب زيد خالدا. This is الفعل الفاعل المفعول به. طيب. So now what happens? This is the fa'il. The fa'il is deleted, and Khalid, which is the maf'ul, takes the position of the fa'il. It takes the position of fa'il. That's why it's called na'ibul fa'il. Na'ib is a deputy in the Arabic language, or something that takes the place of something else. Yes? So Khalid is na'ib of Zayd. It's the deputy minister. Yes? So Khalid is the na'ib of Zayd. طيب. So because Khalid becomes the naib of Zayd, the naib al-fa'il, it has to take all the ahkam of the fa'il. As it has to take all the ahkam, all the rulings of the fa'il. So for example, after it was mansoob, it must become marfu', just like the fa'il. So for example, so what happens here is it becomes duriba Khalidun. Duriba Khalidun. You see, Khalid now is naibul fa'il, and it is marfu' now. You can see that, yes, it is marfu'. Okay. Also, it becomes something which is wajibu ta'khir. What does that mean, wajibu ta'khir? It means that it can never precede the fi'l. Just like a fa'il can never come before the fi'l, likewise na'ibul fa'il can never come before the fi'l. Remember, it has to take all its rulings, all its ahkam. So it's wajib ta'khir, yani it must come later, yani after the fi'l. Just as a fa'il must come after the fi'l and cannot come before the fi'l. Whereas maf'ulun bihi can. Maf'ulun bihi can. Okay. For example, I can say here in this sentence, this one, if I wanted to, I could say Khalidan daraba Zaydun. Yes. Khalidan daraba Zaydun. So maf'ul bihi, al-maf'ul bihi can, in certain circumstances and under certain conditions, it can come before the fi'l. But now, because Khalid is no longer maf'ul, is the acting fa'il, it has to take the rulings of the fa'il. And one of the rules of fa'il has to be marfu'. One of the rules of fa'il is wajib ta'khir. One of the rulings is it cannot be omitted. Like maf'ul bihi can be omitted. For example, if I want to take that off and say daraba Zaydun, I can say that daraba Zaydun. Zayd hit. I can say that. Okay. But you cannot delete the fa'il. Yani I cannot delete Zayd and say daraba Khalidan. We need to know who the fa'il is. Yes, the fa'il is something that has to be there. Okay, a fa'il, you cannot delete a fa'il. Yes, just you have mubtada khabar, you have fi'l and fa'il. It's jumla fi'liya, you cannot delete the fa'il. But you can delete maf'ulun bihi. So now the third hukam here is what? The first hukam was it must be marfu' now. The second hukam was wajib wa ta'khir. The third hukam, for example, is it cannot be omitted anymore. The fa'il here cannot be omitted. Let's say the na'ib al-fa'il. Just like the fa'il cannot be deleted. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's a quick summary of, and there's other ahkam, but the main point is all the ahkam that apply to the fa'il must apply to نائب الفاعل. All right. Let's now read what the author Ibn Ājurrumiyyah rahimahullah says. قال باب المفعول الذي لم يسمى فاعله. Chapter of the maf'ul whose fa'il is not mentioned. What is the maf'ul whose fa'il is not mentioned? What is a maf'ul bihi whose fa'il is not mentioned? What is this maf'ul? This maf'ul is na'ib al-fa'il. Yes? Yani a maf'ul whose fa'il is not mentioned, what is it? In other words, it is na'ib al-fa'il. Na'ib al-fa'il. So babul maf'ul alladhi lam yusamma fa'iluhu wa huwa. And this maf'ul whose fa'il is not mentioned. Like look here. That's what we're talking about. This is originally this is a maf'ul. Khalid originally is a maf'ul whose fa'il is not mentioned. Yani Zayd is khalas, it's not there. Yes? So this maf'ul whose fa'il is not mentioned, يعني نائب الفاعل. What is it? What's the definition of نائب الفاعل? It is an ismu وهو الاسم المرفوع الذي لم يذكر معه فاعله. So نائب الفاعل, it is an ism which is marfu whose fa'il is not mentioned with it. Because if you have a maf'ul whose fa'il is mentioned, then this maf'ul can never be a na'ib al-fa'il because the fa'il is there. If you have a maf'ul in a sentence whose fa'il is mentioned with it, and that then can this maf'ul ever be a fa'il? Na'ib al-fa'il? It can't, because the fa'il is already there. How can it take it's there, the fa'il. So it remains as maf'ulun bihi. But here we're talking about maf'ul whose fa'il is not mentioned. Yani na'ib al-fa'il. Okay, let's look at what the Sharih rahimahullah says. وَأَقُولُ قد يكون الكلام مؤلفا من فعل وفاعل ومفعول به. صحيح. He said kalam, speech, can be comprised of a fi'l, a fa'il, مفعول به. نحو, for example, قطع محمود الغصن. قطع فعل، محمود فاعل، الغصن مفعول به. ونحو حفظ خليل الدرس. حفظ فعل، خليل فاعل، الدرس مفعول به. ونحو يقطع إبراهيم الغصن. فعل، فاعل، مفعول به. ويحفظ علي الدرس. فعل، فاعل، مفعول به. Look at this. حفظ خليل الدرس. Who would like to do the i'rab of that? We don't need to write that down, because it should be like very clear and easy and simple. Okay, Ilyas, let me. Okay, yep, go ahead.
حفظ فعل ماض مبني على الفتح لا محل له من الإعراب.
Yep.
خليل فاعل مرفوع علامة رفعه الضمة الظاهرة على آخره.
Yep.
الدرس مفعول به منصوب وعلامة نصبه الفتحة الظاهرة على آخره.
Yep. أحسنت. So nice and easy, yeah. Okay. To continue. وقد يحذف المتكلم الفاعل من هذا الكلام ويكتفي بذكر الفعل والمفعول. The mutakallim, the person who's speaking, he may delete the fa'il from this speech and suffice with mentioning just the fi'l and the maf'ul. وحينئذ يجب عليه أن يغير صورة الفعل. Upon doing this, it's a must that he changes the surah, the form of the fi'l. The form of the fi'l must change. وَيُغَيِّرَ سُورَةَ الْمَفْعُولِ أَيْضًا, and he also has to change the form of the maf'ul. He has to change two things. He has to change the form of the fi'l and he has to change the form of the maf'ul. أما تغيير صورة الفعل فسيأتي الكلام عليه. As for changing the form of the fi'l, then inshallah we're going to talk about it in a bit. وأما تغيير صورة المفعول, as for changing the surah, the form of the maf'ul, فإنه بعد أن كان منسوبا يسير مرفوعا. After it was mansub, it now becomes marfu'. ويعطيه أحكام الفاعل, and he gives it the ahkam, the rulings of a fa'il. For example, what? من وجوب تأخير الفعل, يعني it must be delayed after the fi'l. It must be mentioned after the fi'l. Also وتأنيث فعله له إن كان مؤنثا, and likewise if the نائب الفاعل, if it is mu'annath, then its fi'l must also have that sign of ta'u ta'nith. That's what I say here. Look, yes. وَيُعْطِي أَحْكَامَ الْفَاعِل. It gives the أحكام الفاعل. For example, what they've given you two examples of أحكام الفاعل. من وجوب تأخير الفعل. It must be delayed after the fi'l, just like the fa'il is. The نائب الفاعل must also be delayed after the fi'l. وَتَأْنِيثِ فِعْلِهِ لَهُ. وَتَأْنِيثِ فِعْلِهِ لَهُ إِنْ كَانَ مُؤَنَّثًا. And its fi'l must be made mu'annath by adding ta'u ta'nith. In kana mu'annathan, if it is mu'annath, yani na'ibul fa'il, if it is mu'annath, of course, then the fi'l has to be also mu'annath. Just like if a fa'il was mu'annath, then the fi'l also has to be mu'annath. وغير ذلك, and other than these rulings. وَيُسَمَّى حِينَئِذٍ نَائِبَ الْفَاعِلِ. Then this maf'ul now, it is called نائب الفاعل, or what is it called? أو المفعول الذي لم يسمى فاعله, or it's called a maf'ul whose fa'il is not mentioned. You can say this, you can say this. It's the same thing. واضح? There's a lot of things we're not going to discuss today. We don't need to go into hardly any details today. Why? Because na'ibul fa'il, it takes all the ahkam, all the rulings, all the i'rab of the fa'il. And this is why we looked at the fa'il in great detail. So today we don't need to go into any more details, because whatever applied there applies here. Whatever i'rab applied there applies here. Nah? So it's straightforward, inshallah. طيب. To continue then. Okay, remember we said here, what did we say here? We said as for changing the form of the fi'l, we're going to speak about it, and here it is. Again, very, very easy, okay? So what does it say? It says تغيير الفعل بعد حذف الفاعل. Changing the fi'l after deleting the fa'il. So Ibn Ājurrum rahimahullah says فإن كان الفعل ماضيا ضم أوله وكسر ما قبل آخره. Mistakes. He said if the fi'l is madi, if it is al-fi'l al-madi, how do you change it? ضم أوله, the first harf, the first letter has a dhamm on it. وكسر ما قبل آخره. وكسر ما قبل آخره. And the letter which is before the last letter, the letter which is before the last one is maksur, kasra. That's fi'l al-madi. وإن كان مضارعا, if it's mudari', ضم أوله, again the first one is it's called dhamm on it, the first harf. وفتح ما قبل آخره. This time the harf which is before the last harf, it is maftuh. So whether it's madi or mudari', whether it's madi or mudari', and you're looking at the fi'l, remember we're talking about the fi'l for what? The fi'l for na'ibul fa'il, not the fi'l for the not the fi'l for fa'il. We're talking about the fi'l for na'ibul fa'il. The fi'l for na'ibul fa'il, if it is madi or whether it's mudari', the first harf is madmoom, dhamm on it, for both of them. Where is the difference between madi and mudari'? It is the harf, the second last harf. In madi it is maksur, in mudari it's maftuh. We can look at the examples. أقول, so Sharih Rahimahullah says, ذكر المصنف في هذه العبارات التغييرات التي تحدث في الفعل عند حذف فاعله وإسناده إلى المفعول. Here the Musannif talks about ذكر المصنف في هذه العبارات. The Musannif in these ibarat, in these expressions, in these statements that he's just made, he's talking about taghyirat. He's talking about the changes which happen to the fi'l when its fa'il is deleted and when it is attributed or attached, you could say here, to the maf'ul. So when the fi'l, when the fa'il of this fi'l is omitted, and when this fi'l is then connected to the maf'ul, the certain changes happen in this fi'l. وذلك أنه إذا كان ماضيا ضم أوله وكسر الحرف الذي قبل آخره, same thing. And if that is to say, if it's madi, ضم أوله, the first harf is madmum with a dhamma, وكسر الحرف الذي قبل آخره, and the harf which is before the last harf, maksur. فتقول, so for example you say قطي الغصن, قطي الغصن وحفظ الدرس. You see how it's changed? قطع حفظ. وإن كان الفعل مضارعا ضم أوله وفتح الحرف الذي قبل آخره. And if it is mudari', the first is madmum, the first harf, just like the madi. وفتح الحرف الذي قبل آخره, and the harf which is the second last harf, the one before the last one, it is maftuh. فتقول يقطع الغصن. You see that? يقطع الغصن يحفظ الدرس قطع حفظ. Yes, straightforward. Okay, let's do two quick i'rabs here. Let's do this one first. حفظ الدرس. What's the i'rab of حفظ الدرس? Okay, Abdul Rahman, you can have a go at this one then. Just 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
Yep, so حفظ فعل ماض مبني على الفتح.
نعم. حفظ درس. But فعل ماض, you would say this one is فعل ماض مبني للمجهول. Yes. And you said وهو مبني على الفتح. Yeah. لا محل له من الإعراب. طيب الدرس.
نائب عن الفاعل.
Yep.
مرفوع
نائب أيوة مرفوع.
علامة رفعه الضمة الظاهرة على آخره.
نعم. اوكي أحسنت. Yep. So حفظ فعل ماض مبني للمجهول وهو مبني على الفتح لا محل من الإعراب. الدرس نائب فاعل مرفوع وعلامة رفعه ضمة إلى آخره. Okay, let's do one more. Let's do يقطع الغصن. يقطع الغصن. Anybody want to have a go at that? يقطع الغصن. Okay, Ilyas, yep, go ahead.
يقطع فعل مضارع مبني للمجهول مبني
مرفوع وهو مرفوع. يقطع الغصن. نعم.
يقطع.
It's the same way you would do the i'rab of a normal فعل مضارع. So يقطع, you would say, you said فعل مضارع, yes. You said مبني للمجهول. Okay, fine. وهو
مرفوع.
أيوة.
لخلوه من الناصب والجازم.
علامة
رفعه الضمة الظاهرة على آخره.
الغصن.
الغصن نائب الفاعل مرفوع وعلامة رفعه الضمة الظاهرة على آخره.
Yep, good. أحسنت, الحمد لله. يقطع فعل مضارع مبني للمجهول وهو مرفوع لخلوه من الناصب والجازم وعلامة رفع ضمة إلى آخره. الغصن نائب فاعل مرفوع وعلامة رفع ضمة ظاهرة على آخره. Nice and easy. Okay, so we dealt with that. Now the last thing we're going to look at today is this. That's the last part connected to Na'ib al-Fa'il, and inshallah we'll finish with that today. So next week we can start fresh chapter Al-Mubtada wal-Khabar bi'idhnillah. Okay, so it says here Aqsamu Na'ib al-Fa'il, the different categories of Na'ib al-Fa'il. Qala, so the author Ibn Ājurrumiyyah rahimullah says, وَهُوَ عَلَى قِسْمَيْنِ. وَهُوَ what? Wa yani Na'ib al-Fa'il. Ala qismain, two types. Zahirin wa mudmarin. Just like in the previous chapter we looked at the fa'il. Zahirin wa mudmarin. What is zahir? What is mudmar? You know what that is, yes? Zahir is just a normal ism. Yani anything which is not dhamir is zahir. And mudmar is dhamir. So it can either be na'ib al-fa'il, it can either be zahir or mudmar. So for zahiru, nahwu qawlik, as for zahir, for example, you said duriba zaydun, ظاهر. يضرب زيد ظاهر. أكرم عمرو ظاهر. يكرم عمرو ظاهر. واضح. We don't need to go into the details of that. Yes, we've just done 2-3 Arabs, so that should be clear how to do the Arab of that. والضمير 12 and sorry والمضمر 12 and as you know the ضمير is 12 2 for متكلم 5 for مخاطب and 5 for غائب 12 والمضمر 12 same as the فاعل نحو قولك like you're saying ضربت ضربنا so these two are for متكلم وضربت so you see here this tha it is a نائب الفاعل this na is a نائب الفاعل ضربت this tha نائب الفاعل ضربتي تي نائب الفاعل ضربتما تو نائب الفاعل ضربتم تو نائب الفاعل ضربتن تو نائب الفاعل ضرب هو the نائب الفاعل ضمير مستتر ضربت نائب الفاعل ضمير مستتر هي ضرب هو ضربت هي ضرب نائب الفاعل ألف ضربوا نائب الفاعل واو ضربنا نائب الفاعل نون نعم okay let's take two i'rabs or even one is enough really let's look at ضربته who are the i'rab of ضربته anybody ضربته first of all let me ask you here ضربته يعني I was hit who hit you who hit me the file is not mentioned by the way the file not being mentioned there are few reasons for that sometimes it's true the file is majhul it is not known sometimes there are other reasons connected to balagha why the file is not mentioned فضربته yes so anybody want to do the i'rab of that that is very simple ضرب فعل ماض مبني للمجهول وهو مبني على السكون لاتصاله بضمير رفع متحرك simple ضرب فعل ماض مبني للمجهول وهو مبني للسكون لاتصاله بضمير رفع متحرك and therefore what is tha easy ضمير متصل just like you do the file same thing ضمير متصل مبني على الضم في محل رفع نائب فاعل ضمير متصل مبني على الضم في محل رفع نائب فاعل Okay. Okay, what about Doriba? Pull out the i'rab of Doriba. Anyone? Doriba.
ضرب فعل ماض مبني للمجهول وهو مبني على الفتح.
لا محل. Yep. لا محل له من الإعراب. ضرب. Again فعل ماض مبني للمجهول. نعم. وهو مبني على الفتح لا محل له من الإعراب. طيب then okay أكمل.
ونائب فاعله ضمير مستتر جوازا تقديره هو.
أحسنت. So we don't say وفاعله, we say ونائب فاعله ضمير مستتر جوازا تقديره هو. Okay, there's only two examples I wanted to do because so everything else now you can see that the i'rab of these, all of these 12 sentences here is exactly like the i'rab of what? Of the fa'il. Remember, the fa'il can also be dhahir, can be mudmar, and we looked at the i'rab of mudmar there in detail, so we don't need to repeat that again. And I've given you two examples to show you how it is slightly different, the i'rab. Yes, so there we would say for example darabtu, ana darabtu zaydan. Darabtu zaydan, that's a normal jumla, fi'l and fa'il. So darabtu, the ta there would be fa'il. Here doribtu, here the ta is na'ibu fa'il. And you can see the form of the fi'l is also different. The form slightly changed. That's it. Apart from that, everything is the same. Everything is the same. And this is why you can see here the sharih, he didn't go into any details here, because he's done it all before in the previous chapter. So he says, Aqulu, I say, ينقسم نائب الفاعل كما انقسم الفاعل إلى ظاهر ومضمر. He said the naib al-fa'il can be divided into, just as the fa'il was divided. So naib al-fa'il can be divided just as fa'il was divided or categorized into dhahir and mudmar. Well, mudmaru ila muttasil munfasil, and then the damir, the mudmar, can be further divided into damirun muttasil and damir munfasil, just like we did with the thing. So for example, you know, here that would be ana, this would be nahnu, this would be anta, anti, antuma, antum, antunna, huwa, hiya, huma, hum, hunna. That's the minimum munfasil. Yes, that's quite simple. Okay, so wa anwa'u kulli qismin min ad-damiri 12. Yes, وأنواع كل قسم من الضمير 12. So both of these, he's saying that the types from each category of damir is 12. So we have 12 for muttasil, 12 for munfasil. There's two categories of damir, yes? Muttasil, munfasil. So the types for each of the categories of the damir, which are muttasil, munfasil, is 12, 12, 12. اثنان للمتكلم, 2 for متكلم, وخمسة للمخاطب, وخمسة للغائب. وقد, then he says, وقد ذكرنا تفصيل ذلك وقد ذكرنا تفصيل ذلك كله. نعم. وقد ذكرنا تفصيل ذلك كله في باب الفاعل. كله, this is توكيد for ذلك, and ذلك here is مضاف إليه. Yeah. Okay, وقد ذكرنا تفصيل ذلك كله في باب الفاعل. So the tafsil, the details of that we mentioned in باب الفاعل. فلا حاجة بنا إلى تكراره هنا. So there's no reason for us to now repeat that again here. Okay, so alhamdulillah, we finished that. It was a bit of a light dars today, and inshallah next week we will start with mubtada wa khabar. Okay, there's a question. Why is it for fi'l madi la min al-i'rab? Because fi'l madi is mabni. Yes, fi'l al-madi is mabni, and it has no mahal. There are some words in Arabic language, they have no mahal. They are mabni and they have no mahal. And al-fi'l al-madi is one of them. It's not in mahalli raf, it's not in mahalli mansoob, it's not in mahalli jar, it's not in mahalli jazm, nothing. It has no mahal. Yes, like also there's many examples, like silatul mawsul has no mahal. So if I say jaa alladhi fid dar, alladhi is mawsul, it has a sila fid dar. So this jumla silatul mawsul has no mahal. So there are some words and some jumal in Arabic language, they have no mahal. Although they are mabni, but they have no mahal. And fi'l al-madi is always mabni. And so is fi'l al-amr. It is fi'l al-mudari that is mu'arab. No? Okay, barakallahu feek. Khair, inshallah. We'll stop here then, and I'll see you next week, inshallah. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad. وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بارك الله فيكم.